Dr. Steve Gilligan.
Hi Guy, hi. How are you?
My name is Wei Kai Hong, and I'm a psychotherapist for 15 years. And I've been learning a lot from Dr. Steve Gilligan. And right now I'm in the trans camp in China. And this is a great opportunity for me to do this interview, to talk about his great work at Generative Change.
Hi. So Dr. Gilligan, that's I know you have 5 major module about generative change. It's been very famous in this world, and there's like systemic change and generative change. And within this 5 module, I'm particularly interested in the generative psychotherapy. What did you think of that? Because I'm as a therapist, I'm very curious about that.
Well, Wei Kai, as you know, I'm a psychologist. I've been a licensed practicing psychotherapist for, 35 years or something. So that's my sort of first base and my first training. Over the years, I came out of the humanistic psychology tradition. I was, my main teacher was Milton Erickson. And I think there has slowly evolved this possibility and also this need in many different societies and cultures for processes beyond psychotherapy or in addition to psychotherapy as mediums and vehicles to help people change. So we work with those in a number of different areas, and say applications in what we call the International Association for Generative Change, IAGC. Generative psychotherapy is one aspect of that, and obviously a very important aspect. Maybe I should say first what it shares with all the generative change work. The generative change work really emphasizes creativity as the most important dimension, the core question of all the work. What is it that the conversation that the work is organized around? What is it that you most want to create in your life? To do that, we have this particular brand of how to get a collaborative connection between the client and the therapist or coach. How to set creative intentions. We put a lot of attention on how to get into a creative state and what that means practically, so that you can think, you can feel, you can act in this sort of high-level state. How to be able to transform obstacles, the inevitable obstacles that come up, and how to develop the generative practices needed to deepen and sustain the work. So what generative psychotherapy really works with are those significant situations where a person is unable to develop or to maintain your basic creative state, what we in the work we call a coach state, a state of being basically present in a centered, open, aware fashion. Most people, you give them some support and some coaching, is that they can get there, and if you support them, they can stay there. Some people, for whatever reason, have got these sort of connections in their life which make it very difficult for them to show up and to remain present. Examples of that would be major depression, or drug addiction, or dealing with certain types of PTSD. An ordinary sort of conversational mode probably is insufficient and inappropriate for a number of those people. So with those people, I think psychotherapy is really the important medium to work in. So what distinguishes generative psychotherapy from the generative change is we put a lot of attention on how to get a therapeutic relationship that's stable, that, in a sense, allows a safe container for a person to work in, so that they're not crashing and that they're not going into negative states. And then it looks at how to apply the specialized sort of educational training that psychotherapists have to be able to work with those types of conditions, like major depression or like significant PTSD, so forth and so on. So the generative psychotherapy isn't sufficient for a psychotherapist, but it's meant to be to help trained psychotherapists work with these type of cases that are really within the domain of psychotherapy.
It's very interesting, and it seems like a great benefit to the psychotherapist.
I hope so. I hope so. You know, I think I started in psychotherapy in the 70s, and it was, I think, a very different scene back then, a very different context. And there were so many possibilities, and the sort of the heroes and the great influences that I had were really about possibilities and curiosity and how to see the best in people and how to help people develop a lot of new possibilities. I think that unfortunately too much psychotherapy has lost that creativity and lost that hope and lost that connection to the best of who people are. So I think that, I hope that the generative psychotherapy work can really reconnect with what I think are always the best in psychotherapy tradition.
It sounds even more fun and more creative in that sense.
You mentioned about the fun and like a creative approach, and I've been doing a therapist for 15 years, and I realize it's not so easy, not so quite possible to do that. How would you say the generative psychotherapy, what's your secret ingredient to make it fun and creative and
well, don't dismiss the fact that it's also a lot of work, and sometimes it's heartbreaking. So, you know, I think that unfortunately we human beings tend to separate those things out and say if it's hard, it can't be fun, or if it's heartbreaking, then it can't be rewarding. But, you know, I think what we're dealing with in intense psychotherapy is we're dealing with life. We see in a session the very best and the very worst of humanity in virtually every session. And we're sort of like called to hold that simultaneously in our hearts, the very best and the very worst. And then to be able to act in a clear-minded, open-hearted way from that. I think one of the things that's really helpful that I find that we emphasize in the generative psychotherapy that I learned from actually all of my great therapist teachers, whether it was Milton Erickson or Virginia Satir or Carl Rogers, who I was not a direct student of, is that they had this commitment to always see the wholeness and the unwoundedness of a person first. And this is one of the things I think we have most lost in psychotherapy. So people come in and every human being is wounded. And some people are suffering from that woundedness more than others. Okay? So they may be coming in and showing the woundedness of a depression or the woundedness of an anxiety, so forth and so on. That's what the sort of the conscious mind is drawn to. Is where the drama is, where the most intense feeling is, so forth and so on. The problem for the client is they've become hypnotized by that, if you will. That their primary focus is sort of been locked onto that suffering. We don't have the luxury of doing that if we're going to help people. So what we really emphasize in generative psychotherapy is there is a woundedness, a brokenness in every human being. there's also really, really importantly, there is an unbrokenness and an unwounded and unwoundable part of each person. If you have any doubts, you can see a person might be totally upset and disturbed, and just one little moment they see something of beauty, or they hold their 3-year-old granddaughter, or they hear a funny joke. And for that moment, all of a sudden the sky clears. And you see, there it is. Where did it go? Maybe 2 seconds later it gets covered up. So part of our challenge as a therapist is to really see the unbrokenness and the unwoundability of the deepest part of the human spirit. And to be able to hook up with that, to connect with that, to begin to hold that as a mirror, while we also be able to make room for the woundedness and do the careful work and the skillful, compassionate work that's frustrating, that never has a clear manual-based way of dealing with it. But I think we have to work at those 2 levels simultaneously. And that's really one of the hearts of generative psychotherapy.
You say like it's a container to hold it all together from the therapist state.
Yeah, and what you're holding is the human being. The DSM, of course, always says on the first page, a person should not be reduced to their diagnostic category, to their mental disorder. But 99% of the time we do that. We think, oh, I've got this depressed person, or this anxious, or this person with PTSD. While we can understand how easy it is to do that, we should understand how dangerous and disrespectful it is to do that at the same time. And we should really emphasize that we need to have this commitment and the skill base to be able to sense, again, what I say is the unwoundability of a person. And then to be curious about how we could skillfully reflect that back, cajole that out, touch a little bit here, touch it a little bit there, so that a person realizes that's who I really am at the deepest level. And when I can be able to sense that, I begin my own self-healing process. If I can't sense that, then I'm basically reduced to my symptom, and I can't really heal. I can manage at best. And I think that's too often what psychotherapy has become reduced to.
I totally agree with you. Our ultimate goal is to have the client or the patient to be their own therapist. They can cure or heal themselves.
Yeah, I think so. And we all get by with a little help from our friends.
Yes.
So, again, in terms of when is generative psychotherapy needed, when a person cannot hold that state for themselves, then those are the times that they need to get a little help from their friends. And hopefully we can be friends of the soul, if you will, what the Irish call a nam cara, a friend of the soul, and that we can hold that wholeness in that safe place with the person so that they can begin to learn to hold it for themselves.
Can you tell us how to find more about this generative psychotherapy?
Well, our website is IAGC, or you could go to my website, which is stephengilligan.com. We have the IAGC.com website that's coming up, and all an elaboration of this and training programs and so forth. Can all be found on the website.
So we can hold this, and I can learn from you more and more. And I think that's what I really want, and I get a lot from you. What you just say really inspired me in the perspective of psychotherapists. It's totally different from what I learned before many years.
Yeah, well, I think it is not mainstream anymore. And I would just harken back when I was coming of age, all the way back when. I think it was much more common. You know, we had those sort of giants and greats, and I think we'd given up on this possibility of being human. And we've gone too much into the left brain managerial mode as the highest possible human state to be able to deal with the suffering of life. I think it's a mistake.
I agree. And I'm so happy you helped me to clarify that idea that there's a part of human being is unwanted and they can be whole as a whole.
I think so. In fact, I think everything that I do professionally is based on that appreciation.
Appreciation. Yeah. And I very much appreciate it.
Anam Kara.